I'm sure you've seen this picture, but did you know it's actually not true? It wasn't the US Embassy and it wasn't the last helicopter to leave. This is where I am right now. I'm at the Pittman Apartments. Let me get back over there. So give me 30 seconds, I'll explain everything. So this is 22 Gialong Street, or 22 Lý Tự Trọng Street. It's now renamed. This photograph was taken by Hubert van Es, a Dutch photojournalist. To my knowledge, this was the only helicopter evacuation that took place from the Pittman Apartments. Everybody thought it was the US Embassy. Here's why. Once the evacuation took place, there was no other helicopter to return, so those people that were up on the ladder were actually stranded. Hubert van Es then took that photograph into the darkroom and then prepared to transmit it to the Tokyo United Press International office at 5 p.m. that day. The problem was they captioned it as U.S. Embassy, and he actually told them it wasn't. He pleaded with them to change it, but they didn't. And that's why, unfortunately, it's still thought of as a U.S. Embassy. It definitely was
This is the Pittman Apartments here in Saigon. The Fall of Saigon, April 30th, 1975. People escaped through this gateway. This was Operation Frequent Wind. Once on that airport had been closed. People mistakenly think it was the U.S. Embassy. It was not. It's an expat and diplomat residence. So we evacuated people through this rooftop. Over 7,000 people were evacuated at the Fall of Saigon, April 29th to April 30th, 1975. And that was the end of the Vietnam War. We left kind of in disgrace, and we didn't win, we didn't lose, but we lost a lot of people in the process and spent a lot of money. And we're involved in a conflict that really, was disputed if we should have been or not. Let me give you a few notable sites so you can orientate yourself. There's the City Hall, there's the Rex Hotel, and then over here is the Hotel de Poste, or the post office, and the cathedral. So those are big time Saigon sites as well. Yep, sounds good.
So in the last month of the Vietnam War, in April 1975, about 45,000 people were evacuated from Saigon. Most of that was done with fixed-wing aircraft, but in the last couple of days of the Vietnam War, so on April 29th and April 30th, the airport, Tan Son Nhat Airport, had been badly damaged and it had been shelled pretty heavily in the couple days prior, so it was completely closed, and like Henry Kissinger eliminated it as an option for evacuation. Now, Ambassador Graham Martin basically made the Marines take him to the airport to make sure it was definitely not an option. At that point, then they activated Operation Frequent Wind. So in those last couple of days, specifically on April 29th, about 4,000 people were evacuated, and the remainder were evacuated the next day, just in the morning. So 71 helicopters flew 660 sorties between Saigon and the 7th Fleet out in the South China Sea. Unfortunately, there were still a few hundred people left at the U.S. Embassy, which they didn't realize people would congregate at, and they unfortunately had to leave. Ambassador Graham Martin pleaded with the military to go back, and he pleaded with the pilots to go back and try to get the rest of those people, and unfortunately they weren't evacuated. The U.S. did allow the fleet to stay near Vietnam in case people were able to get there by boat or some other means, and we were able to get a few more refugees out of the country that way. But unfortunately, after the North Vietnamese took power, there was a pretty brutal suppression of people, anyone that had all been an informant to the CIA, and they basically forced them into labor camps. It was a pretty brutal situation for people that were left behind that were friendly to the United States and friendly to the South Vietnamese. So if you've watched it this far, that was the end. That was the end of the Vietnam War. On the 30th of April 1975, that was when the tanks smashed through the gates of Independence Palace. It was about 11:30 in the morning. That palace has now been renamed Reunification Palace, and those two tanks are commemorated there in the front lawn of it. But that was it. They raised the flag of the North Vietnamese, and it's been under control of the North Vietnamese ever since. It's now the new country of Vietnam, and that was shaped in 1975.